Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the most popular myths about language learning and tell you guys what I think about them, so just stay tuned. Alright, first things first, before we get into this video, I want to talk to you guys about this online platform, Skillshare. Alright, what is Skillshare? Skillshare is an online learning community for creators, not only for creators, but basically for everybody who wants to learn a new skill set or wants to simply expand their skill set in one area or subject. So you can choose from a variety of over 25,000 classes in literally any subject. You can take photography classes, language courses, business classes, productivity lessons, painting lessons. There's literally anything you would like to learn or expand your knowledge on, you can find it on Skillshare. For only $10 a month, you have the liberty to choose from all varieties of classes. Any skill set you need to know, you can learn from creators who've been through the experiences and who want to share the skills with you. And I think that's a great tool because it creates a great community where creators share their skills with each other. So I took this basic beginners Tagalog course, which I found absolutely great because it is a short 12-minute course, but which will precisely teach you every basic that you need to know in order to greet and introduce yourself. And Skillshare is the perfect platform to keep you continuously learning and creating. Alright, so I have some exciting news for you guys. 500 of my subscribers who click on the link first and sign up for a subscription will get 2 months free of Skillshare classes. Like, you can choose from any classes you want to for a whole 2 months. Please click that link down below and check out the classes. I'm sure there's more than one class for you, so check that link out below and let's get into this video. Alright, one of the most popular myths I've heard is it's easier to learn a language while you're a child or when you're young, and the older you get, the harder it gets, basically. So that means, according to this myth, for adults it would be nearly impossible to learn a new language. Let me tell you that that is absolutely not true. I've experienced it on my own. I have had languages that I learned at a much younger age and languages that I learned while being a late teenager, and those languages I learned being a late teenager, today I speak them more fluently than the ones I learned while I was younger. For example, I learned French when I was 12-13 years old, and I learned Spanish and Portuguese while I was like 17, Portuguese while I was like maybe 24 or something, and I speak those languages today better than French. So that's a myth. It is true that kids' brains are more receptive to new concepts and new languages because basically you're working with the empty canvas. And for adults, 99% of times they're already preconditioned, so that's why it's more difficult to put a new set of language on an adult's brain because it's already preconditioned to another language that person has learned before. And that is why it can seem that it's easier for kids to learn a language because they're not as preconditioned. Their brain is basically more empty. Another reason is also kids are much more unafraid to speak out, to interact, so it's a lot easier for them when they learn a new language to interact with other kids, to speak the language. They're not as hesitant as adults are a lot of times because they're simply afraid to speak and to fail, and kids don't have that fear of failure. And I think that's the main point why it seems that it's easier for kids a lot of times. They don't have this thing inside of them which keeps them back, so they just go straight forward for the things they want to say and for the things they want to try. They just simply do. It is not always easier for kids. It's only that adults are a lot of times more preconditioned and they have a lot more fear and they're a lot more hesitant. As a matter of fact, you can always learn, and learning and training your brain is basically like training a muscle. If you just leave your brain and don't train it, it cannot function to its full potential. So continuing to grow, continuing to learn will always build your muscle and make it easier to learn. That's why when you learn one language, it will be easier to learn another one because you've basically trained your muscle in this area, and that is why it will get a lot easier. The second most common myth I've heard of and hear all the time is that only naturally gifted people can learn a bunch of languages, can learn multiple languages to a very good degree. I truly believe that everybody can come to a degree where they can learn multiple languages and surpass themselves. People who seem naturally gifted for it, they simply have found their method of learning, and everybody has their own method. I'll come to that in another point. They simply know how to receive and how to reconstruct things. I have my own method. Another polyglot may have their methods. There's no wrong or right in this. You just simply work with what works for you. Alright, third myth that I've heard a lot is that you actually have to live in the country where the language that you want to speak is spoken. And that is not 100% true, I would say, and I will let you know why. I've learned Portuguese to a certain degree. I had never been to Portugal, neither to Brazil, and my Portuguese was, not to brag on myself, but my Portuguese was good. For a person who had never stepped a foot to the country where the language is spoken. In my case, I'm speaking for Brazilian Portuguese because that's the one I chose to learn. And actually, when meeting Brazilians, they were completely shocked as to how I managed to speak with that fluency without having never stepped a foot into the country. That is basically due to me trying the best to immerse myself while not being in the country. That means, as I told you guys, I did it with films, movies, talking to Brazilians, having conversations with them, having language partners, Brazilian language partners, music. So all of those cultural things helped me immerse myself to the best degree I could, even though I wasn't living in the country. Another misconception is that you have to focus on grammar. That is absolutely untrue. A lot of my Spanish speaking friends, Portuguese speaking friends, or French speaking friends who have told me about studying English have told me the same thing, that I have been learning year after year grammar structures. They can tell me all English grammar, but they're barely able to form a proper sentence in English. And that is the problem in a lot of school systems in a lot of countries. I have done a university system in Spain as well in France, and I've seen it, how it works. It's very different than the system in Germany, for example. The way I was taught English was so different than the way they are taught English in France or in Spain, for example, where it's a lot of grammar and structure approach. Like, they're not very focused on speaking, getting the students to speak. They're more concerned about the students learning all the grammar structures that are out there, but they can barely speak. And I'm always wondering, what did you learn? And they tell me, like, it's always grammar, and basically always the same grammar structures. And I remember when I was in high school, we've never really focused on grammar structures that much, but we focused more on speaking correctly, on pronouncing correctly. So we had more of a communication with our teacher that really helped us form our comprehension, and as well as not being afraid to speak, which is a major problem that I encounter with people who have not had this schooling system. Alright, the last common myth is that every person learns the same and that you have to follow a method that basically works for everybody, and that is absolutely untrue. So as I said in the beginning, you have to find your own way of learning, and you have to find out what works for you, because what might work for you might not work for me, and vice versa. That's why I always stress everything that I'm giving you on advice is what worked for me, but it doesn't mean that everything would necessarily work for you guys. So I always try and give a range of and variety of tips and tricks, but it's not 100% sure way to learn, but it is definitely what works for me, and apparently it worked. And that is why I always advise you to search for different methods that would work personally for you, and you have to personalize your way of learning. So people asking me how long it took me to study this language or how many hours I used to study, I usually never know what to answer to those type of questions, because those are questions which will vary individually from person to person. So the amount of hours or minutes I spend daily on studying is not the same amount that you might need, because I might be more receptive, or I might learn in certain areas a lot quicker than somebody else. I have a very auditive learning method, so for me it is more about hearing than, for example, reading. A lot of people read more I prefer to hear more, so that's why I prefer to watch those series and learn by listening to music. I don't have a hard time reproducing sounds that I hear. I know that a lot of people do have a hard time, in fact, doing that. So as I said, find out your own unique method that will work for you. So this was the video for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.